I thought it was odd because we really hadn't thought much of Greenland before President Trump brought it up. And now it's sort of in the forefront, but it wasn't before. So when he started talking about it, I think a lot of people were taken aback. And then when he appointed our governor to be the special envoy, people were really surprised because we didn't know what connection Jeff Landry had with Greenland. Now he's there visiting. So that's sort of interesting. I mean, we want to make sure that he doesn't neglect his day job, which is being our governor. So it just goes to show you the closeness between Donald Trump and Jeff Landry. They're very tight, and that's a very strong relationship there.
And were you surprised that he was sent over now? It's May. Obviously, this has not been really talked about for a little while. It seems to be behind the scenes. What do you think the whole purpose of this trip is now?
I think it is to establish better relations, to make connections. Jeff Landry's been in this position for a while, so they've been talking a lot about him. On my program, I have actually, interviewed journalists from Denmark that want to know more about Jeff Landry. So there's this big interest in who he is. Obviously, Denmark is concerned about this whole relationship and where it's going. So I think that's what it's about: making connections, building relationships for the governor, since he's in this sort of unusual role, really. Because I
Absolutely.
mean, the climates couldn't be any different. I mean, much different between Louisiana and Greenland. I mean, we're talking about worlds apart.
Yes, this will be a bit of a shock to his system. At least it's slightly different weather there now.
Exactly, exactly. But I think as we look into it more, I think the reason President Trump seems to be so interested in Greenland is because of the Golden Dome. I think he sees Greenland as being essential to have this Golden Dome constructed, and they have the kind of coverage that he wants for the United States.
And for those who don't know, just talk to us a little bit about what that is.
So it's really the modern version of SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, which is a missile defense, which is a program launched by Ronald Reagan back in the 80s to protect the United States from incoming missiles. And the president is talking about a larger system of the Iron Dome, of course, is very famous in Israel, protects Israel from a terrorist attack. So we're talking about the Golden Dome, which would protect our entire country from rogue terror attacks, from nuclear missile launches, so that we have that kind of security that Reagan had initially envisioned back in the 80s, but we really didn't have the technology for it. But I think now they have much more technological advancements that make it much more likely that it can actually be constructed successfully. But it's going to cost, according to figures that I was looking at, over $1 trillion.
And do you think that that's needed? What's your personal opinion?
I do. I do. I think it is worthwhile because it does protect us from, a nuclear attack, because there are uh, chances that they could get in the hands of potential terrorist groups. And, there are a lot of nuclear missiles in Russia. We don't know, whether all of those are secured. China's got them, North Korea's got them. Of course, we're trying to prevent Iran from getting them. Other countries have them. India, Pakistan, they have a nuclear club of about, I think, 9 members. But the real worry, I think, is that a terror group would get their hands on one and be able to threaten the U.S. So, yeah, this is something we've talked about for decades, and I think the president sees this as a way to really implement it.
And what do you think of the expanded military presence there? Do you think it's realistic that we can do that?
In Greenland,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think obviously it would be necessary. I mean, I think we've got a military presence there now. We're looking to expand it. I mean, the president, I think, sees threats from the Arctic, from Russia, China, and believes this is a real important way to secure our country. So, yeah, I think we would have a increased military presence there. I think that's why so many of our officials have gone over there. Now our governor. So I would not be surprised if we start hearing more about Greenland in the next few months. Once this war in Iran is over, and I believe it will be over within the next 2 months. I do think we're going to be hearing more about Cuba and more about Greenland.
And obviously, a lot of the talk now, Trump's rhetoric in the beginning, there were a lot of criticism. What do you think that he's dialed that back a bit? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, he's had criticism since the day he came down the escalator. I mean, he's had criticism since day one. I mean, he's provocative, he's brash, and he's a New Yorker. I mean, that's just what he generates as criticism. Love him or hate him. I mean, there's really both sides. I mean, he's got his staunch supporters and he's got the people that are afflicted with what we call TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people I think are appalled by his comments, and whether it be about Iran, Greenland, whatever. So that's just part of the course with Donald Trump. I mean, you turn on some of these networks, and that's what they're going to be doing, and then the other networks are going to be praising him. So it's really one extreme or the other.
But a lot of these talks about Greenland have been behind the scenes now, haven't they? He hasn't openly talked about it for a while. Do you think that's a strategic? Why do you
I
think that?
do
Think he's going to be
remember
more
when he
open after the prime minister has now said that, Greenland cannot be bought? Do you think he's going to respond to that in any way?
Well, remember when he came out with that meeting with the Supreme Commander of NATO, and they had their discussions about Greenland, and the rhetoric sort of dialed down. All of a sudden, he said that they had worked out an agreement, but we never really knew, what the specifics were. So, I mean, I think right now we're in a position of trying to learn more and figure out what exactly is the plan. But I think our governor is obviously a big part of it, and he's a very trusted Trump ally. So I think that's why he was picked for this role. Which, again, a lot of us down here in Louisiana are scratching our head as to how in the world this happened, and what the connection is. And I think it all revolves around the relationship between the governor and the president through Don Jr., who I think is a very close friend of Governor Landry.
And he wasn't exactly met with open arms. Was told to
Right.
go home. What challenge do you think he has now, and how do you think he can handle this trip?
Well, he's used to criticism. He gets a lot of it here in Louisiana, so I think he's got thick skin. So he's going to do what President Trump asked him to do. So he's going to soldier on and do whatever kind of connections and meetings and negotiations that he's instructed to do, because he's very loyal to the president and a staunch supporter. So I think he expected, I mean, he had initially been invited there, and then the invitation was rescinded. So he's had a few of these episodes where he's been sort of treated harshly, and I think he's ready for that. He's accustomed to it.
And obviously, he's taken a more low-key approach during this visit. Do you think that was smart diplomatic strategy, to build on the broader concerns that Trump has already put on the table?
I do. I do. You never want to outshine Donald Trump. You never want to get in the way of what Donald Trump is saying. You don't want to create a controversy by speaking off the cuff. You want to be very measured and very controlled in what you say. And I think that was the right strategy. I really do.
And with Russia and China expanding their ambitions in the Arctic, do you think Trump forced a conversation that Washington and America's allies have been maybe avoiding? What's your
I,
thoughts on
I think that is 100% right. I think, love him or hate him, I think he does have a knack for seeing things in a sort of a longer term fashion than most political leaders. And I think he sees the future potential area of conflict, of vulnerability for the United States. So I think that's why he started focusing on Greenland and something that could really assist us in our security and prevent future threats from Russia and China. I mean, he knows what we're dealing with. He just met with President Xi in China. He's met with Vladimir Putin. He invited Vladimir Putin to the G20 summit. So he believes in dialogue with these folks. He knows what they're all about. But I think he's clear-eyed as to the threat that they pose to the U.S.
And obviously, his special envoy basically said, we're here to listen. Do you think that they may meet somewhere in the middle as opposed to, we're going to take over Greenland? How do you
Yeah,
see this
I,
coming out in
here's
the end?
here's my prediction. I mean, I don't think Greenland's going to become our 51st state. Uh, I mean, I like us at 50, actually. I'm very happy with 50. I'm looking for Venezuela or Puerto Rico or Washington, D.C. or Greenland or Canada. You talked about Canada being a state. I think they'll negotiate something whereby we're going to have more influence in Greenland, more military installations in Greenland, more control over what we need for the Golden Dome and security for our country. So I think that's what will, in the end, happen: a greater presence there, more U.S. military involvement, but still not officially part of the United States.
And you think he was actually ahead of the curve? How do you think he came to this conclusion and why do you think he was?
I think he's ahead of the curve on a lot of things. I really do. I think, there's a lot of things you can fault him for, but I think there's certainly things you need to give him credit for. And I think he does see the importance of things that others don't see. And, a Golden Dome was, again, not something people were talking about prior to President Trump bringing it up. The importance of Greenland, people weren't talking about that before he brought it up. I mean, his snatching Maduro from Venezuela. I mean, that was bold. I mean, we've talked about the problem of Venezuela for years. He did something about it. He dealt with it. So he acts in a bold manner. He does have visionary thinking. He obviously does sometimes get himself into trouble with how he talks, but that's just part of who he is. I mean, that's how he is. That's how he was as a real estate developer in New York, as a reality TV star, and that's who we have as a president.
Do you think we're going to see any more big, bold moves like this? Because obviously he's been criticized of whether some of these things are legal, obviously with what you just mentioned. Do you think we'll see any other, next we're going to take over?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's what he's all about, big, bold moves. Yes. I mean, we're going to see it throughout the rest of this term. I mean, who was talking about a ballroom for the White House? I mean, he brought that up. I mean, he created that. An arch. I mean, all these different things that he has brought up are things that others really weren't talking about. So yeah, I have no doubt that he's got other bold moves that are planned. I mean, there could be now domestic sort of a focus over the next few months as the midterms are coming. He might do something boldly with elections. He's talked about election corruption, so there might be a bold move to do something about that. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot more coming that we're not going to be ready for because it'll be a surprise.
And have you ever been to Greenland? Has anyone been to Greenland?
I'd
What
like
is
to
there?
go. I really would. I'd really want to go to Iceland and Greenland, but no, I have not been, and uh, would love to go one day. Maybe there'll be more reason to go in the future, maybe. So yeah, I would love to.
In the context of Greenland, it's concerning that the administration continues with this desire to acquire Greenland at a time when the U.S. needs to prioritize harmony and unity in the transatlantic community because of bigger issues such as Russia and Ukraine or even Iran. And I think that U.S. policymakers have underestimated the impact not only on European policy elites and politicians, but also on the people of Europe, what sort of impact the rhetoric has had on being willing to support the United States for, for operations, let's say, in the Middle East, at the same time that the president is talking about possibly invading a NATO country.
Absolutely. And obviously, we saw today was the special envoy going over and being told to go home. How difficult do you think this is going to be, and why do you think it's important for him to be over there? And obviously, he says he's open to listening and talking to people. How do you think about the way they've gone about it?
Well, President Trump has done one thing really well throughout all of this. He has reminded people of the importance of Greenland. Greenland is important, undoubtedly. It's important for the defense and security of the North Atlantic area. It's vital for the homeland defense of the United States because of its location. And there is a potential that in the future it could have vast energy resources. And I say in the future because existing technology and environmental circumstances right now don't allow for the extraction of much of anything from Greenland, much less critical minerals or anything like that. So it's good that President Trump has reminded people of Greenland's importance. The special envoy going there today, I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have sent him. But I felt like all things considered, he handled it well. I saw the brief Q&A session with the media. He said the right things. He was there to listen. He wanted to learn, which is good because I find with these situations, when you get on the ground and you learn the nuances, you learn the detail, then maybe your opinion might change. It's not as simple as there's this big plot of land in the Arctic that America wants, so we're just going to take it. That's not exactly how it works, certainly in the 21st century. And I suspect he'll figure this out after he has his meetings.
And what do you think will be done over there? And what do you think the best thing would be to do for Trump? And if we are talking in support of him, how would be the best way to go about this now?
Well, President Trump has walked back a lot of the Greenland rhetoric. At Davos, we saw this. We went from possibly invading Greenland to now we have a framework for an agreement. This is President Trump's style. We know this by now. He starts really big and then he usually ends up somewhere in the middle of two extreme positions. But it's just the cost of him doing it this way with our allies that concerns me because like I said, I felt like it burnt a lot of bridges in terms of goodwill and America's image in Europe when we're asking for European help in the Persian Gulf, and then they're saying, well, we're worried that you might invade Greenland. It doesn't really add up geopolitically, and I understand Europe's concerns here. But I think the best thing that could happen is for President Trump, for the United States, for Greenland, and for Denmark to get around a table and figure out the best way that America can boost its national security interests in the region generally and specifically in Greenland. And luckily, due to the existing legal frameworks that we have in place, the United States can do more in Greenland. We can have more troops there. We can have more bases. The Greenlanders would like this. Well, they would have liked it maybe, before. Now they're probably kind of on the fence trying to figure everything out. And the Danes would quite happily go along with this as well. So there is a way that everyone can benefit. It doesn't require or even lead to America acquiring Greenland, but it certainly could lead to America having a bigger role in security on that island. And I think that would be a positive thing.
And obviously, Trump, like you say, has pulled back a lot of the rhetoric. He's having more of a secret background talks. Do you think it's good to be doing things behind the scenes instead of openly
Yeah, of
talking
course.
about it?
Certainly so. Especially in this context. Greenland is a part of Denmark in the same way that, Puerto Rico is part of the United States or the Falkland Islands are part of the United Kingdom. And it's NATO territory. So if the U.S. feels like that there's a threat to Greenland from Russia or China, then the answer is to do more to bolster Greenland's security, not threaten to invade it and annex it. And I think with the public blowback received not only in Europe, but many Americans, a lot of MAGA supporters I saw on social media were saying, we voted for cheaper gas and lower grocery bills, and now we're getting Greenland and the Panama Canal. So there was a lot of amongst some of the base, a lot of questions asked like, why now? Why Greenland? And then at the same time, a lot of the policy community in Washington was wondering, why now? Because you had the National Security Strategy published first week of December of last year, of 2025. Nowhere in this document does it mention the Arctic or Greenland. It's literally not found in this document. And then a week later, if you remember at the time in middle December, we're talking about possibly invading Greenland because it's so vital to our national security. So I think doing this quietly around a table, working out what everyone's interests are, and how to do this in a way that friends do, that allies do, I think is the best way forward.
Absolutely. And whether expanded military presence is that realistic under the current Denmark-Greenland agreements?
It's absolutely possible. There was an agreement that goes back to the late 1950s that has been updated several times over the decades. The U.S. has the ability to put more forces in Greenland, open more bases if we need to. That's not a problem at all. So I suspect where this is all going is we will have some sort of troop increase, which I think everyone would welcome because there was nothing stopping us from doing so in the past. We'll probably have some sort of critical minerals agreement on paper that will state different, ideas and concepts about America having access and the right to, like maybe right of first refusal for these minerals, keeping the Chinese out of the energy minerals sector in Greenland. And so we'll probably have some sort of minerals agreement like that, and maybe some sort of economic agreement, all of which would be welcome. On the economic front, there's very few economic relations. There's a very small economic relationship right now that up until last year was the first time in 2 decades that there was even a direct flight from the United States to Greenland. It was a seasonal flight that left out of Newark that went to Greenland during the summer. And they're renewing that for this summer, so that's great. There's no direct shipping line between North America and Greenland. There's very little trade. In terms of the minerals, as I already alluded to, there's difficulty in getting the minerals out of the ground and finding them. Greenland has an ice sheet about twice the size of Alaska. That at its thickest point is about 2 miles thick. So you can't really do much there. And there are only two mines in operation in Greenland right now. Neither of them are swimming in profit, and neither have any Chinese investment. And in fact, every time the Chinese have tried to invest in Greenland, whether it's through mining, through acquiring real estate, they tried buying an old naval base several years ago, or they tried to become major investors in the renovation and construction of three major airports in Greenland. They've been blocked. So the system works as it is. So the question is, how does Trump feel like that he can declare victory in all of this? And that's where I think the Greenlanders and the Danes are probably walking a tightrope trying to figure out.
Yeah, because that's what I was also going to ask. How does this fit into the broader Arctic geopolitics involving like Russia and, China?
Yeah, it does fit in. Greenland, for matters of geometry, geography, and physics, Greenland's location is vital for certainly the air defense, early warning systems for the North American continent, in terms of the way intercontinental ballistic missiles would fly around the world. So it's crucially located there. It's close, part of Greenland serves as the northern point of something called the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, which is this geographical area in the North Atlantic where Russian submarines tend to pass through regularly. But we've been doing this since the 50s or 60s, monitoring this. This is nothing new. Where there is less of a threat right now in Greenland is with China. China does invest in other Arctic countries. Greenland really isn't one of them. The last time, last time there's publicly available information of the Chinese Navy operating in the North Atlantic was 2017, so almost a decade ago. So this idea that, as some in the White House like they paint this picture that Greenland's surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships. It's just not the case. Can more be done to bolster security? Yes. Is Greenland important? Yes. But is it under constant and direct threat of being taken over by Beijing? No.
And obviously, we're seeing on the update this morning as well that Greenland's prime minister said today that he had a respectful and positive meeting with the with Donald Trump's envoy. To basically, he made clear though that they are not for sale. How do you think Trump is going to respond to this? Do you think he'll respond publicly or say anything about it, or do you think this is something that's still going to be kept in the
Well,
background?
it'd be very dangerous to predict that, considering the nature of his Truth Social postings. So I don't know if he'll comment about this latest visit or not. But I think that President Trump has come to the realization that maybe he's pushed a little too hard on the Greenland issue with our European partners and allies, and that there's a way to achieve his intent, his objectives, without such forceful rhetoric. I think Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte did a fantastic job at working behind the scenes to get the temperature down on this issue. Why the President Trump's special envoy went to Greenland now, I really don't know. I mean, I could take a guess because at least the weather is starting to warm up and it's sunny most of the day now, whereas, in the winter it's cold and dark the whole time. So maybe just simple meteorological reasons led to his visit now in May. But who knows what if he was dispatched recently by the White House, if this was his own initiative because he wants to stay in the good graces of President Trump, nobody knows. But at least it doesn't seem, at least so far as we know, it hasn't been this, diplomatic blow up or anything like that. So, things remain stable and calm.